poor Maid recognized what doctors overlooked. Her actions saved the Mafia boss's daughter. That's how it all begins, when a quiet maid, the girl no one ever notices, sees something the doctors completely miss. The Mafia boss's daughter drops to the floor, shaking, dying, while everyone screams for help. But the maid is the only one who understands what's really happening. And when she steps in to save the girl's life, she doesn't just break the rules, she breaks the world she thought she knew. Because the moment the daughter opens her eyes again, everything changes. The Mafia wants to claim the maid, the government wants to erase her, and the girl she saved whispers a terrifying truth. Someone inside the mansion tried to kill her. Now the maid is trapped between killers, secrets, and a man who protects her with violence no one can escape. But saving a life awakened a deadly war. Why was she the only person who could stop the girl from dying? And what will she do now that everyone wants her silenced? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Through the pre-dawn darkness, Karen Marin's worn sneakers moved silently across the polished marble floors of the DeSantis mansion's West Wing. At 5:30 in the morning, the enormous house lay quiet, except for the occasional footsteps of armed guards patrolling the perimeter. She pulled her cleaning cart behind her, each wheel carefully oiled to prevent squeaking that might draw unwanted attention. The mansion's opulence never failed to take her breath away, even after 6 months of employment. Crystal chandeliers caught the first hints of morning light, casting rainbow reflections across walls adorned with priceless artwork. Karen kept her eyes down as she worked, knowing better than to appear too interested in her surroundings. In this world of wealth and danger, the best survival strategy was invisibility. She started with the library, dusting shelves lined with leather-bound books she longed to touch but didn't dare. The scent of old paper and wood polish filled her nostrils as she worked, bringing back memories of countless hours spent in the university library before everything fell apart. Before her father's gambling debts had forced her to abandon medical school and take whatever work she could find. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions, dust, polish, vacuum, while her mind wandered to the medical texts hidden under her thin mattress in her tiny apartment. Last night, she'd rescued a perfectly good anatomy book from the dumpster behind the local college. The corner was slightly torn, but the information inside was intact. Her fingers itched to open it, to lose herself in the familiar comfort of medical knowledge. The sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway snapped her back to attention. 2 of Vittoria DeSantis's personal guards passed, by their shoulder holsters visible under expensive suits. Karen kept her movements steady, her expression neutral. They barely glanced at her. Just another member of the cleaning staff, beneath their notice. She remembered the first time she'd seen Vittorio DeSantis himself, striding through the mansion like a storm cloud in an Italian suit. His cold eyes had swept past her without recognition, but she'd felt the power radiating from him, the barely contained violence. She'd learned quickly to make herself scarce whenever he was nearby. As morning light filled the mansion's vast windows, Karen moved methodically through her assigned rooms. The West Wing housed various studies and sitting rooms, each more luxurious than the last. She cleaned around priceless antiques and artwork worth more money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes, careful never to linger too long in any one spot. In the small break room reserved for household staff, Karen forced down a bland sandwich during her designated lunch period. Other maids chatted quietly around her, sharing gossip about the family and their associates. She ate in silence, observing without participating. The less anyone knew about her, the better. "Did you hear about Mr. DeSantis' meeting today?" one maid whispered to another. 3 black cars arrived this morning. Important people from the old country, they say. Karen filed away the information automatically, a habit born from years of study. Her mind worked that way now, constantly cataloging details, making connections, storing away potentially useful information. It was the same way she approached her nightly studies of the medical texts she salvaged. The afternoon dragged on in a blur of cleaning solutions and careful movements. Karen's back ached from bending and reaching, but she never allowed her posture to slip. Perfect posture was part of her invisibility. Any sign of weakness or discomfort might draw attention. As other staff members began departing at the end of their shifts, Karen volunteered to do one final check of the West Wing, as she often did. The supervisor barely acknowledged her offer, used to her apparent dedication to her work. No one suspected she had other motives for staying late. When the wing was finally empty, Karen slipped into the storage room on the 3rd floor. It was filled with outdated furniture and boxes of old paperwork, thick with dust that showed no one had entered in months. Behind a heavy mahogany armoire, she'd created a small reading nook, complete with a battery-powered booklight. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled the new neuroscience booklet from her uniform pocket. The cover was creased, discarded by some student who'd probably barely glanced at its contents. To Karen, it was treasure. She settled onto her makeshift seat, a cushion stolen from a condemned chair, and opened the booklet with reverent care. The familiar medical terminology washed over her like a soothing balm. Here, in these stolen moments with salvaged books, she could pretend she was still that bright-eyed medical student with a future full of promise. Her finger traced diagrams of neural pathways as she mouthed the technical terms to herself, committing each page to memory. Hours passed as Karen lost herself in study, practicing diagnosis scenarios in her head. A slight sound in the hallway made her freeze, holding her breath until the footsteps passed. The mansion was never completely quiet, with guards performing regular security sweeps, but she'd memorized their patterns weeks ago. When her booklight began to dim, Karen knew it was time to leave. She carefully tucked the booklet into her pocket and erased all signs of her presence from the storage room. Tomorrow she would return, adding another small piece to the medical knowledge she refused to surrender. As she gathered her cleaning supplies and prepared to clock out, Karen caught a glimpse of herself in one of the mansion's many mirrors. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her uniform hung loose on her thin frame. The young woman who'd once worn a white coat and dreamed of saving lives was barely visible anymore. But knowledge was the one thing they couldn't take from her. Not the loan sharks who'd destroyed her family, not the circumstances that had forced her into this life, not even the dangerous man whose house she cleaned. In the privacy of her mind and in these stolen moments of study, she was still Dr. Karen Marin, the person she was meant to be. She signed out at exactly 10 o'clock, nodding goodbye to the night guard. The evening air was cool as she walked to the staff parking lot, her steps quick but unhurried. In her pocket, the neuroscience booklet pressed against her hip like a secret weapon. Tomorrow she would return to her role as the invisible cleaning woman, moving unnoticed through rooms of power and wealth. But tonight, in her tiny apartment, she would fall asleep with medical texts spread across her bed, holding on to the last remnants of a dream that refused to die. The guards barely glanced at her car as she drove through the gates of the DeSantis estate. To them, she was just another servant leaving after a long day's work. They never suspected that beneath her carefully maintained facade of submission lay a mind sharp enough to diagnose complex medical conditions, or that their barely noticed cleaning woman spent her nights studying medical journals pulled from university dumpsters. Karen drove home through quiet streets, her mind already organizing the information from the neuroscience booklet into neat categories in her memory. Tomorrow would bring another day of invisible observation and careful movement through the mansion's dangerous dynamics. But for now, she had her books, her knowledge, and the small flame of ambition that refused to be extinguished. Morning light streamed through the mansion's towering windows, casting long shadows across the grand hall's polished marble floors. Karen moved silently between the elegantly set tables, refilling water glasses with practiced precision. The formal luncheon was in full swing, with the low murmur of important conversations floating through the air like expensive perfume. She kept her eyes downcast as she approached the main table where Elena DeSantis sat among the most influential guests. Elena's dark hair cascaded over her shoulders in perfect waves, her designer dress speaking of wealth and privilege. Karen had always thought she carried herself with unusual grace for someone born into such a dangerous world. The crystal water pitcher felt cool against Karen's palms as she carefully topped off glasses, making herself as invisible as possible while the Mafia elite discussed business in measured tones. She had just finished serving the last guest when movement caught her eye. Elena's hand suddenly jerked, sending her fork clattering against fine china. The sound drew immediate attention, but Karen saw what others missed: the slight twitch in Elena's left eye, the way her fingers splayed unnaturally against the tablecloth. Time seemed to slow as Elena's spine went rigid. Her eyes rolled back, showing whites that gleamed in the chandelier light. Then her whole body began to convulse violently, sending her chair scraping backward with a harsh screech against marble. The grand hall erupted into chaos. Chairs toppled as guests leaped to their feet. Security guards materialized from the shadows, weapons half drawn as they assessed for threats. Someone screamed for a doctor. Karen stood frozen, the water pitcher still clutched in her hands, as she watched Elena's seizure with growing horror. The twitching wasn't random. It followed a distinct pattern she'd seen illustrated in a damaged medical document she'd salvaged months ago. The same document that had detailed the catastrophic failures of early neural implants. Two doctors burst through the double doors, their black bags swinging as they rushed to Elena's side. Karen's heart hammered against her ribs as she heard their rapid-fire discussion. Classic grand mal seizure, the first doctor declared, reaching for an anti-epileptic injection. No! The word nearly burst from Karen's throat, but she managed to contain it to a whisper. She knew that medication would interact fatally with the malfunctioning neural implant. Her mind raced through the contraindications she'd memorized during countless late-night study sessions. The second doctor was already preparing a sedative. Karen's hands shook as she set down the water pitcher and approached the nearest guard. A broad-shouldered man she recognized from the night shift. "Please," she whispered urgently. "It's not epilepsy. It's a neural implant misfire. The medication they're preparing will kill her." The guard gave her a dismissive glance. "Get back to work," he growled, shifting to block her view. Karen retreated a step, her chest tight with panic. Elena's convulsions were growing more violent. The doctors were measuring medication into syringes. In moments, they would administer a combination that would stop Elena's heart. Memories of her medical training flashed through Karen's mind. Not from a prestigious hospital, but from stolen moments with salvaged books and pirated medical journals. She knew the signs, she knew the treatment, and she knew she couldn't stay silent. Around her, the chaos continued to unfold. Vittorio DeSantis's voice boomed across the hall, demanding updates. Guards herded worried guests toward the exits. The doctors knelt beside Elena, preparing to administer their fatal mistake. Karen's feet moved before her mind could catch up with the consequences. She hurried after the medical team. As they transferred Elena onto a stretcher, her heart pounding so hard she could barely hear the shouts around her. Every step toward Elena's private suite felt like walking toward her own execution, but she couldn't stop. She knew too much about neural implant failures to stay quiet. She knew too much about the damage the wrong treatment could cause. Most of all, she knew that if she didn't act now, Elena DeSantis would die. The procession moved swiftly through the mansion's opulent corridors, Elena's unconscious form jostling on the stretcher as the doctors rushed her toward her suite. Karen followed at a distance, her cleaning uniform allowing her to blend into the background even in this crisis. Her mind raced through everything she knew about neural implant misfires. The symptoms were unmistakable: the specific pattern of muscle contractions, the distinctive pupil dilation, the way Elena's fingers had splayed in that telling configuration. She'd spent countless nights studying those patterns, fascinated by the intersection of technology and neurology, never imagining she'd witness it firsthand. Guards flanked the stretcher, their faces grim as they cleared the way. Staff members pressed themselves against walls, wide-eyed and whispering. Karen kept pace, her heart threatening to burst from her chest with each step. She could hear the doctors discussing treatment options ahead of her, their voices confident but wrong. So terribly wrong. The medications they planned to use would interact with the implant's electrical misfiring, creating a cascade of neural damage that would stop Elena's heart within minutes. Karen's fingers twisted in her apron as she walked, her mind spinning through possible ways to intervene. She could try speaking to another guard, but the first one's dismissal still stung. She could attempt to reach Vittorio DeSantis himself, but his security would never let her near him. The procession reached Elena's private suite, a luxurious set of rooms Karen usually only entered to clean. The doctors shouldered through the doors, barking orders to the staff inside. Guards took up positions outside, their stands making it clear no one else would be allowed to enter. Karen stopped, several feet from the door, her chest heaving with suppressed panic. Through the closing door, she caught a glimpse of Elena's pale face, still twitching with those distinctive spasms. The doctors were already unpacking their bags, preparing the very medications that would kill her. Time was running out. In moments, they would administer the treatment and Elena's death would be inevitable. Karen stood in the hallway, trembling with the weight of knowledge she wasn't supposed to have and a decision that could cost her everything. She had spent years making herself invisible in this house of power and danger. She had learned to move without being seen, to observe without being noticed, to exist without drawing attention. But now, Elena's life hung in the balance, and Karen's carefully constructed invisibility was about to shatter. The sound of running feet approached from behind, more medical personnel arriving with equipment. Karen pressed herself against the wall, her mind racing. She had seconds to decide: stay silent and watch Elena die, or speak up and risk exposing herself, and all her forbidden knowledge, to one of the most dangerous men in the city. Elena's last conscious moment replayed in Karen's mind, the look of confusion and fear that had crossed her face just before the seizure took hold. In that instant, she hadn't been the daughter of a mafia boss or a woman born to privilege. She had simply been a patient in desperate need of the right treatment. The medical knowledge Karen had accumulated through years of secret study burned in her mind. She knew what was happening. She knew how to help. And despite every instinct for self-preservation screaming at her to walk away, she knew she couldn't let Elena die. The new medical team rushed past her with their equipment, and the suite's doors began to swing shut. Karen watched them close with the terrible certainty that she was about to destroy the careful life she'd built. But she couldn't walk away. Not when she could prevent a death. Not when everything she'd studied in secret could finally serve its true purpose. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she took a step toward the guard station. The medications would be administered any moment now. She had to act. She had to speak up. She had to save Elena DeSantis, even if it meant exposing herself to all the dangers she'd spent years avoiding. The medical suite stood briefly empty, its pristine surfaces gleaming under soft lighting that did nothing to mask the urgency of scattered equipment and hastily discarded packaging. Karen's heart thundered in her chest as she slipped inside, her movements quick but deliberate. The doctors had rushed out moments ago to retrieve additional supplies, leaving Elena unconscious and vulnerable on the bed. Monitors beeped their warning. Elena's vitals were deteriorating rapidly. Each moment brought her closer to the catastrophic cascade Karen knew would follow if the doctors proceeded with their planned treatment. The young woman's skin had taken on an ashen tone, her muscles still twitching with the telltale pattern of neural implant dysfunction. Karen's fingers trembled as she reached for the small cleaning kit concealed in her apron pocket. She'd modified the tools over countless late nights, studying diagrams from that waterlogged manual she'd salvaged months ago. The thin metal probe she'd fashioned from a broken thermometer might look crude, but its measurements matched the specifications exactly. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Elena's still form as she brushed dark hair away from the base of her skull. "This will hurt, but it's better than the alternative." The implant access point was exactly where the manual had indicated, a nearly invisible port nestled beneath the hairline. Karen's makeshift diagnostic tool slid in with terrifying precision. The resistance pattern confirmed her fears. The implant's primary circuit was locked in a feedback loop, sending dangerous signals cascading through Elena's neural pathways. Sweat beaded on Karen's forehead as she worked. The manual's instructions played through her mind in fragments. Calibration sequence requires precise timing. Risk of permanent damage if misaligned. Patient mortality rate exceeds 87% without immediate intervention. Elena's body suddenly went rigid, monitors screaming as her blood pressure spiked dangerously. Karen's hands remained steady, even as panic clawed at her throat. She had seconds, not minutes, to complete the recalibration before permanent damage set in. "Come on," she muttered, carefully rotating the probe to the exact angle needed. "Please work." The first reset sequence failed, Elena's vitals continuing their desperate climb. Karen forced herself to breathe, to focus. She'd memorized this procedure, spent countless nights practicing the movements on spare wiring and circuits. She could do this. She had to do this. The second attempt triggered a violent muscle spasm in Elena's right side. Karen held her position, knowing that moving now would cause catastrophic damage. The monitor's shrill warnings reached a fever pitch as Elena's heart rate accelerated dangerously. "Just a few more seconds," Karen whispered, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms. Her fingers moved with practiced precision despite her terror, executing the final sequence of adjustments. For one horrible moment, everything went silent. The monitors, Elena's breathing, even Karen's own thundering pulse seemed to pause. Then Elena's body relaxed, the brutal tension melting away as her vitals began to stabilize. Color returned to her cheeks as her breathing evened out. The sound of running footsteps in the hallway barely registered before the door burst open. Karen's victory evaporated as Vittorio DeSantis filled the doorway, his massive frame radiating lethal intent. 2 armed guards flanked him, their weapons already drawn, and aimed at her head. Vittorio's face was a mask of cold fury as he took in the scene, his daughter unconscious, a maid bent over her with an unknown implement in hand. His gun appeared in his grip as if by magic, the barrel leveling between Karen's eyes. "Papa!" The weak voice froze everyone in place. Elena's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition as she focused on Karen. "She saved me!" The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implications. Vittorio's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, calculation replacing pure rage. His gun remained steady, trained on Karen's forehead as he spoke in a voice like ice-coated steel. "Everyone out!" The command cleared the room in seconds, leaving only Karen, Elena, and Vittorio himself. "Now explain. Every detail. Choose your words carefully. They may be your last." Karen's legs trembled as she stood, her hands raised slightly to show they were empty. The modified probe lay on the bed beside Elena, looking impossibly inadequate against the luxury surrounding them. She drew a shaky breath. knowing her next words would determine whether she lived or died. "Your daughter has a neural implant," she began, her voice surprisingly steady despite her terror. When it malfunctioned, it created a feedback loop in her nervous system. The doctors were going to treat it as epilepsy, but their medications would have killed her instantly. Vittorio's expression remained carved from stone, but his eyes narrowed fractionally. "Continue." I've studied neurology. In secret. I recognized the symptoms from technical manuals I found. The implant needed manual recalibration to break the feedback loop. I used modified tools to perform the procedure. She gestured weakly toward her crude instruments. "I know I shouldn't have been reading those things or making those tools, but if I hadn't..." "She's right, Papa." Elena's voice was stronger now, though still weak. I could feel myself slipping away before she helped me. The doctor's treatment would have killed me. Vittorio remained motionless, his gun unwavering as he processed their words. Karen could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes, weighing threats against advantages, measuring risks against potential uses. His reputation for ruthless pragmatism was legendary in the household. Finally, he spoke again, each word precise and heavy with meaning. "You will tell me everything you know about these implants. Who installed it, when, and why. You will explain exactly what you did to fix it. Then you will tell me how a maid came to possess such knowledge and why you chose to reveal it now." Karen's throat went dry. She had no way to know if the truth would damn or save her, but lies would certainly mean death. "I can tell you everything I know about the implant's function and the procedure I performed, but I don't know who installed it or why. I only recognize the symptoms from my studies." "Your studies?" His tone made the words sound like an accusation. "Elaborate. I wanted to be a doctor. Before..." The words tumbled out, years of hidden dreams and secret fears spilling into the open. When that became impossible, I started collecting discarded medical texts, studying whatever I could find. I taught myself, practiced with any equipment I could salvage or modify. I never meant to use it, but when I saw Elena collapse, something shifted in Vittorio's stance, subtle but significant. The gun lowered fractionally as his gaze swept over his daughter's improved condition, the stable readings on the monitors, the crude but effective tools Karen had fashioned. "You risked exposure and death to save her." It wasn't a question. "Yes." Karen's answer was simple, honest. "I couldn't let her die when I knew how to help." Vittorio holstered his weapon in one smooth motion, but Karen knew she wasn't safe. If anything, she was in more danger now. She had proven herself useful, which made her both valuable and a potential threat. His next words confirmed her fears. "You understand that your life has changed irreversibly." Again, not a question. "Your knowledge makes you far too valuable to return to simply cleaning floors, and far too dangerous to ever leave these walls." Karen's hands trembled at her sides as the full weight of her new reality settled over her. She had saved Elena's life, but in doing so, she had shattered the careful invisibility that had protected her for so long. She was now bound to the DeSantis family in ways she couldn't yet comprehend, her fate tied to the very people she'd spent years avoiding. Elena reached out weakly, her fingers brushing Karen's hand in silent gratitude. The touch seemed to draw Vittorio's attention, his gaze sharpening as he observed the interaction. Another calculation, another assessment of potential uses and risks. "We will continue this discussion once my daughter has rested," he declared, his tone making it clear this was not a reprieve but merely a postponement. "You will remain here and monitor her condition. Guards will be posted outside. Do not attempt to leave this room." The threat in his words was clear. She was now as much prisoner as medic, her skills making her both invaluable and untrusted. Karen nodded her understanding, sinking into a chair beside Elena's bed as Vittorio moved to the door. She could feel the weight of his regard, heavy with unspoken warnings and possibilities. The door closed behind him with a final sounding click, leaving Karen alone with her sleeping patient and the knowledge that her life would never be the same. She had saved Elena DeSantis, but the cost of that salvation was yet to be determined. "Come with me." Vittorio's command brooked no argument as two armed guards flanked Karen. They led her through the mansion's winding corridors, far from the servants' quarters she'd called home for the past 3 years. The guest suite they brought her to was larger than any room she'd ever occupied. Cream-colored walls, plush carpeting, and a king-sized bed made it feel more like a luxury hotel than a prison. But the armed men positioned outside her door told a different story. Your belongings will be brought up, Vittorio informed her. His voice was controlled, emotionless. For your protection, you'll stay here, close to my office. We have much to discuss. Karen nodded, her throat too tight for words. The room's proximity to his office wasn't coincidental. He wanted her where he could watch her, control her movements, monitor her actions. Clean yourself up, he ordered, gesturing to the ensuite bathroom. Then we'll talk. 20 minutes later, showered and dressed in fresh clothes someone had delivered, Karen sat across from Vittorio in his office. The space exuded power. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's manicured grounds. Explain your medical knowledge. His first question came like a bullet. Every detail. From the beginning. Karen's hands twisted in her lap. I wanted to be a doctor since I was young. My mother was sick for years, cancer. I spent so much time in hospitals, watching the doctors work, learning everything I could. But you never attended medical school. No. The admission hurt, even now. My father's gambling debts. There was no money. I worked cleaning jobs to help support us after Mom died, but I never stopped learning. His eyes narrowed. How? I collected discarded medical texts, downloaded free research papers, studied whatever I could find. During night shifts, I'd practice sutures on oranges, memorize anatomy charts, read about surgical procedures. And the neural implants? I found damaged files about experimental tech, heavily redacted, but enough to recognize the symptoms. When Elena collapsed, the pattern matched exactly. Vittorio leaned forward, his presence filling the room. You're telling me you taught yourself advanced neuroscience from trash? Yes. Karen met his gaze, knowing a lie would mean death. I have a gift for understanding medical concepts. Once I see something demonstrated, I can replicate it. He studied her for a long moment, then pressed a button on his desk. A guard entered with a tablet, which Vittorio slid across to her. On the screen was a complex surgical procedure. Watch this once, then explain it to me. For the next several hours, he tested her. Medical scenarios, diagnostic puzzles, technical questions that probed the depths of her knowledge. Karen answered everything, her mind racing to keep up as the pressure mounted. Each correct response seemed to intrigue him further, like a collector discovering an unexpectedly valuable artifact. Throughout the day, he received updates about Elena. Each time his facade cracked slightly, revealing glimpses of the father beneath the Mafia boss. His eyes would soften, his shoulders would relax, minutely. But whenever he turned back to Karen, the warmth vanished, replaced by calculated assessment. As afternoon faded to evening, Vittorio led her to the mansion's formal dining room. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over the massive table where a single place setting waited. He gestured for her to sit, then took his own seat at the head of the table. Karen ate in silence while he watched, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. The food was exquisite, so different from the simple meals she was used to, but she could barely taste it under his scrutiny. Your knowledge makes you valuable, he finally said, swirling red wine in his glass. But it also makes you dangerous. You understand this? Yes, she whispered. You will help Elena recover. You will assist our medical team. You will continue your studies under supervised conditions. His tone left no room for negotiation. In return, you'll want for nothing except your freedom. The words hung heavy in the air. Karen's fork trembled slightly against her plate. This arrangement is non-negotiable, he continued. You've seen too much, know too much. Your life is now bound to this family. I understand. What else could she say? She'd known the moment she'd saved Elena that there would be no going back. Do you? His eyes locked onto hers. There is no outside world for you anymore. No contact with former friends or family, no unsupervised communication, no leaving these grounds ever. Your entire existence will be here, under my control. Is that truly clear? Karen forced herself to hold his gaze. Yes, Don DeSantis. It's clear. Something flickered in his expression. Approval at her formal address, perhaps, or satisfaction at her acceptance of her fate. He nodded once, then signaled for the guards. They escorted her back to her new suite, their footsteps echoing through the silent corridors. The room felt different now, its luxury a gilded cage. As the door closed behind her, Karen heard the subtle click of the lock engaging. She moved to the window, pressing her hand against the cool glass. Beyond the manicured gardens and high walls, the city lights twinkled in the distance, a world she would never rejoin. She had saved Elena's life, but the price was her own freedom. The guards outside her door shifted positions, their shadows visible beneath the doorframe. Karen turned away from the window, taking in what would now be her permanent home. The bed she would sleep in, the desk where she would study, the sitting area where she would spend her confined hours. All of it beautiful, all of it a prison. She thought of her small room in the servants' quarters, the hidden medical books she'd cherished, the simple life she'd lived in the shadows. In trying to save one life, she'd irreversibly altered her own. There would be no more sneaking books from the trash, no more secret study sessions, no more pretending to be invisible. Instead, she was now visible in the most dangerous way possible, seen, known, and owned by one of the most powerful men in the criminal underworld. Her knowledge had made her valuable, but that value had become her chains. Karen moved through her evening routine mechanically, testing the luxurious bathroom products, changing into silk pajamas that had appeared in the closet. Everything spoke of wealth and comfort, but also of control. Every item carefully chosen and provided, nothing left to chance or personal choice. As she lay in the two-soft bed, staring at the ornate ceiling, Karen realized that her dream of becoming a doctor had finally come true, in the most twisted way possible. She would practice medicine, use her knowledge, help people, but only within the confines of Vittorio's empire, only under his watchful eye, only for as long as he deemed her useful. The guards outside her door changed shifts, their quiet movements a reminder of her new reality. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more tests, more scrutiny from the man who now controlled every aspect of her life. But for tonight, all she could do was lie in her gilded cage and remember the moment she chose to save Elena, the moment that sealed her fate. The night deepened around her, the mansion settling into silence. In her guarded suite, Karen closed her eyes, knowing that when she opened them again, it would be to the first day of her new life. One bound forever to the DeSantis family, to their secrets, and to their world of shadows and power. Sunlight streamed through the silk curtains as Karen stirred from her first night in the luxurious prison. The bed's softness had made sleep elusive, too different from her thin mattress in the servants' quarters. But it wasn't the unfamiliar comfort that jolted her fully awake. It was the angry voices echoing through the mansion's halls. "You have no authority here!" Vittorio's voice carried through the walls, his usual controlled tone replaced by barely contained rage. Karen slipped from the bed, pressing her ear against the cool wood of her door. The guards outside shifted, but didn't stop her from listening. "Don DeSantis, this is a matter of national security," a clipped official voice responded. "The neural implant program is classified. We require immediate access to Elena DeSantis for medical monitoring." Karen's heart stuttered. "Government agents? Here for Elena? My daughter will not be your lab rat." Vittorio's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "You lost that right when your device nearly killed her. The malfunction was unfortunate, but unfortunate!" The sound of something shattering punctuated Vittorio's words. "Get out. Now, before I forget diplomatic immunity exists." Heavy footsteps retreated, followed by tense silence. Karen backed away from the door, her hands trembling. The government knew. They had to know someone had tampered with the implant, someone unauthorized, someone who shouldn't have that knowledge, someone like her. Hours passed in tense silence. Karen paced her room, touching nothing of the expensive breakfast left on her side table. Around noon, the door opened, revealing Vittorio. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes blazed with barely contained violence. "Sit!" He gestured to the small sitting area. Karen perched on the edge of an armchair, watching as he closed the door and moved to stand by the window. His shoulders were rigid beneath his tailored suit. They asked specific questions about the implant recalibration. He spoke without turning. They wanted to know if anyone unauthorized had accessed it. Anyone. Unexpected. The air felt too thick to breathe. They know someone interfered. Yes. Now he turned, fixing her with that penetrating stare. They have protocols, procedures, certified technicians, yet somehow a maid with stolen knowledge managed what their experts couldn't. That makes you valuable and dangerous. Karen wrapped her arms around herself. What will they do if they find out it was me? They won't find out. His voice hardened. But understand this. If you step outside my protection, even for a moment, they will eliminate you. There will be no warning, no chance to explain. You'll simply disappear. Tears pricked at her eyes. I never meant... Intent is irrelevant. He cut her off. You saved my daughter. For that you have my protection. But that protection only works if you follow every rule, every restriction without question. No communications outside, no unauthorized movements, no attempts to leave. Your life depends on absolute compliance. I understand. Her voice was barely a whisper. Do you? He moved closer, looming over her chair. Look out that window. Tell me what you see. Karen rose on shaky legs and approached the window. In the gathering dusk, she could see dark vehicles positioned strategically around the estate's perimeter. Men in civilian clothes who moved with military precision conducted what looked like casual patrols. They're watching, she breathed. They'll always be watching. Vittorio's presence behind her radiated dangerous heat. They know someone here has knowledge they want contained. They'll wait, observe, hope for a mistake. One misstep, one moment of carelessness, and they'll have their excuse. Karen pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching another unmarked car roll past the gates. How long will they stay? Until they're certain their secret is safe. His reflection in the window was dark, imposing. Until they either confirm you don't exist, or until they eliminate you. The full weight of her situation crashed over her. This wasn't just about being kept in a gilded cage anymore. This wasn't even about being bound to the DeSantis family. She had inadvertently stumbled into something much bigger, a government conspiracy, classified technology, secrets worth killing for. I saved her, Karen whispered, more to herself than to Vittorio. I just wanted to save her. And now I must save you. His words carried an odd intensity that made her turn to face him. You are under my protection, Karen Marin. That means something in my world. But it also means you belong to me now completely. Your life, your safety, your future, all of it depends on accepting that reality. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Outside, the surveillance continued, men in shadows watching for any sign of her existence. The knowledge she'd gained from discarded medical texts had saved Elena's life, but it had also marked Karen for death. Her only shield now was the very man who had terrified her just yesterday, the Mafia boss whose protection was both salvation and prison. Vittorio moved away from the window, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. Rest. Tomorrow we begin your official training with our medical team. The more valuable you make yourself, the more reason I have to keep you safe. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Karen alone with her thoughts and the darkening view. She remained at the window, watching as more vehicles arrived, more men positioned themselves around the estate. They would wait in those shadows, patient and lethal, hoping she would make a mistake. But there would be no mistakes, no escape attempts, no coded messages, no desperate bids for freedom. She had saved Elena's life, and in doing so, had sacrificed her own. Now her existence belonged to Vittorio DeSantis, the only thing standing between her and the government agents who wanted her erased. Night fell completely, but the surveillance didn't cease. Through the darkness, Karen could make out the dim glow of cigarettes, the occasional flash of communication devices, the subtle movements of men trained to hunt and kill. They were waiting for her, these shadows in the night, waiting for one chance to complete their mission. But they would wait forever. Because Karen understood now, with crystal clarity, that her life depended on becoming exactly what Vittorio demanded, invisible to the outside world, valuable to his family, and completely, irrevocably his. Morning light filtered through the mansion's ornate windows as Karen made her way to Elena's suite, her heart racing with each step. Vittorio's instructions had been clear and sharp. Stay with Elena, monitor her recovery, report any changes immediately. 2 guards flanked Elena's door, their dark suits and barely concealed weapons, a reminder of the danger that now surrounded them both. They nodded curtly, letting Karen pass into the suite's sitting room. Elena sat propped up against plush pillows on a chaise lounge, her face pale but her eyes bright. Karen, she smiled warmly, extending her hand. Papa told me you'd be staying with me today. Please, sit. Karen perched carefully on a nearby chair, hyper-aware of her position as both caretaker and captive. How are you feeling this morning? Better, thanks to you. Elena's gratitude was genuine, making Karen's chest tighten. The doctors say the implant readings are stable now. I still can't believe you knew what to do. Before Karen could respond, the door opened. Vittorio strode in, his presence immediately filling the room. His dark suit was impeccably tailored, emphasizing his powerful frame. His eyes swept over Elena first, then landed on Karen with an intensity that made her breath catch. Everything stable? His question was directed at Karen, though he kept moving toward his daughter. Yes, sir. Her color is good, and there's no sign of tremors. He bent to kiss Elena's forehead, a gesture so tender it seemed impossible from those deadly hands. Rest, Piccola. No excitement today. Papa, I'm not a child, Elena protested, but her fond smile revealed their close relationship. Throughout the morning, Karen helped Elena with gentle activities, reading, light sketching, quiet conversation. Between these peaceful moments, Vittorio appeared regularly, his presence growing more disruptive to Karen's concentration each time. Tell me about yourself, Elena said during one quiet moment, setting aside her book. How did you learn so much about medicine? Karen hesitated, conscious of the guards outside. I always wanted to be a doctor. When that became impossible, I started reading whatever medical texts I could find. Impossible why? Money, family debt. Karen smoothed her skirt, avoiding Elena's sympathetic gaze. Life doesn't always go as planned. No, Elena agreed softly. It certainly doesn't. Their conversation was interrupted by Vittorio's fourth visit of the morning. This time he lingered, watching their interaction with unreadable eyes. Karen felt his gaze like a physical touch as she checked Elena's pulse and pupil response. Your technique is practiced, he observed, his voice low and dangerous. Where did you train? I didn't, sir. Karen kept her eyes on her task. I learned from books and videos. Self-taught. His tone held disbelief and something else. Interest. Yes, sir. The air between them crackled with tension. Elena glanced between them, her expression curious. Throughout the day, Karen found herself drawn into Elena's world. The young woman shared stories of her childhood, her art, her dreams. Each conversation chipped away at Karen's isolation, forming a connection she hadn't realized she desperately needed. But every time Vittorio appeared, that connection was overshadowed by the electric awareness between them. He moved like a predator, all controlled power and lethal grace. Karen caught herself watching his hands, remembering how quickly they had moved to threaten her that first day, and how carefully they touched Elena now. As evening approached, Elena tired. Karen helped her prepare for bed, ensuring she was comfortable before leaving her in the care of her night nurse. She had just reached her own room when a guard appeared. Mr. DeSantis wants to see you in his study. Now. The study was a masculine space of dark wood and leather, dominated by a massive desk. Vittorio stood at the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He didn't turn when she entered. Sit. Karen lowered herself into one of the leather chairs, facing his desk, her pulse thundering in her ears. You're an enigma, Karen Marin. He finally turned, his movements fluid and controlled. A maid with the knowledge to save my daughter from classified technology. A woman who reads neuroscience texts for pleasure. He set his glass down with deliberate precision. I don't like enigmas. I'm not trying to be mysterious, sir. No. He leaned against his desk, too close to her chair, then explained. Everything. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell his expensive cologne mixed with something darker, more dangerous. I wanted to be a doctor since I was young, when my father's gambling debts made that impossible. I couldn't let go of the dream completely. I started collecting discarded medical texts, studying at night. The neural implant manual, I found it in fragments, digital files someone had thrown away. And you memorized it? I memorize everything I read about medicine. She forced herself to meet his eyes. It's all I have left of that dream. His hand moved, almost touching her face, before dropping away. You're either brilliant or lying. Neither option makes me comfortable. I'm not lying. The words came out stronger than she intended. His eyes darkened. Careful, Bella. You're valuable, not invincible. The endearment slipped out seemingly without his intention. His jaw tightened, and he pushed away from the desk, putting distance between them. You'll continue monitoring Elena. The doctors will test your knowledge, verify your story. He turned his back to her, his shoulders rigid. Go. Karen stood on shaky legs, feeling the weight of his stare as she moved to the door. Just before she left, she glanced back. Vittorio watched her with an expression of barely contained hunger, his control visibly fraying. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but the tension followed her down the hall. Her skin tingled where his gaze had lingered, and her heart refused to slow its frantic beating. Back in her room, Karen pressed her forehead against the cool window glass. The surveillance vehicles still lurked in the shadows, but they weren't what made her feel trapped. It was the growing, impossible attraction to a man who could kill her with a word. A man who watched her with equal parts suspicion and desire. A man she could never, ever want if she wanted to survive. She closed her eyes, remembering the way he'd almost touched her face, the slip of that endearment from his lips. Dangerous. Everything about this was dangerous. Outside, the night deepened, and somewhere in this massive house, Vittorio DeSantis was likely fighting the same battle she was, trying to ignore the pull between them, trying to remember all the reasons they should stay apart. Karen moved away from the window, knowing sleep would be elusive tonight. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, felt the phantom touch of his hand, heard the rough edge in his voice when he'd called her Bella. She was playing with fire, and she knew it. But in this gilded prison, with death lurking outside the gates and desire burning within them, she was beginning to wonder if getting burned might be worth it. Karen sat with Elena in the sunlit medical room, reviewing the latest readings from her neural implant. The morning light streamed through tall windows, casting a deceptively peaceful glow over the medical equipment. Elena reclined on the examination chair, her dark hair spread across the white pillow, while Karen studied the data scrolling across the monitoring screen. "How are you feeling today?" Karen asked, keeping her voice gentle as she noted Elena's vitals. "Better. Stronger." Elena smiled, though fatigue still shadowed her eyes. "Thanks to you." Karen returned the smile, but her attention caught on an anomaly in the data stream. She leaned closer to the screen, frowning, as she analyzed the pattern of electromagnetic spikes. Her heart began to race as recognition clicked into place. "What's wrong?" Elena asked, catching her expression. "I need to check something." Karen's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up historical data from the day of Elena's collapse. The pattern was unmistakable, regular, precision-timed surges that couldn't be natural malfunctions. "These spikes..." Karen's voice trembled slightly. "They match the signature of a manual override. Someone deliberately tried to activate your implant's kill switch." Elena's face drained of color. "Are you certain?" "Yes, look." Karen pointed to the screen. "These patterns are too precise to be random. Someone with access to the control protocols attempted to trigger a fatal surge." "Papa needs to know." Elena's voice shook. "Now!" Karen pressed the silent alert button they'd installed for emergencies. Within 30 seconds, Vittorio burst through the door, 2 guards flanking him. His eyes went straight to Elena, scanning for immediate threats before focusing on Karen. "What happened?" Karen showed him the data patterns, explaining the significance of each spike. "Someone tried to kill her, sir. Someone who knew exactly how to manipulate the implant." The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Vittorio absorbed this information. His expression hardened to granite, eyes turning to Arctic ice. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "Someone inside my organization." It wasn't a question. "The override signatures suggest intimate knowledge of the system," Karen confirmed. "It had to be someone with direct access to the control protocols." Vittorio's jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone, barking rapid orders in Italian. Within minutes, the mansion hummed with increased activity. More guards appeared in the hallways, and Karen could hear the sound of vehicles arriving outside. "Take Elena to her room," Vittorio ordered. "Stay with her until I send word." As Karen helped Elena from the examination chair, she noticed unfamiliar faces among the security personnel. The usual guards had been replaced with new men, their eyes harder, movements more precise. Military training, she guessed, not the usual Mafia muscle. They walked slowly through the mansion's corridors, Elena still weak from her recovery. Karen felt eyes on them from every direction. The new guards tracked their movement with predatory focus, and shadows seemed to shift in her peripheral vision. "Something's wrong," Elena whispered. "I've never seen Papa this angry." Karen squeezed her hand reassuringly, but her own nerves were on high alert. The mansion's atmosphere had changed, becoming charged with lethal intention. Even the servants moved differently, hugging the walls, speaking in whispers. They had just reached Elena's suite when Vittorio appeared, his stride purposeful. "Inside, both of you." Once the door closed, he turned to Karen. "You're being moved to the secure wing tonight." "Why?" Karen asked, though she suspected the answer. "Because whoever tried to kill my daughter will want to eliminate the woman who exposed their attempt." His eyes locked onto hers. "You're now a primary target." Elena gasped. "Papa, no! It's already decided." He cut off her protest with a gesture. "Karen stays in the secure wing, under maximum protection. No one enters without my direct authorization." Karen felt the walls closing in further. The secure wing was deep within the mansion's heart, reserved for the family's most precious assets. Being moved there meant she was both valued and vulnerable. "Sir," she started, but Vittorio stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "This is not a discussion." His voice dropped lower, intended only for her ears. "I will not lose the one person who can protect my daughter from these bastards." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. For a moment, the mask slipped, and she glimpsed something raw beneath his controlled exterior: fear, rage, and something else she didn't dare name. "Return to your current room for now," he ordered, stepping back. "Pack what you need. Guards will escort you to the secure wing after dinner." Karen nodded, knowing better than to argue. As she left Elena's suite, she noticed the security formation had changed again. 4 guards now, moving in synchronized patterns around her. The weight of their presence made her skin prickle. Back in her room, Karen sat on the edge of her bed, trying to steady her nerves. The setting sun cast long shadows through her window, and she could hear increased activity outside, more vehicles arriving, men calling out commands, the subtle shift of a household preparing for war. She began gathering her few possessions, mostly borrowed clothes and the medical texts Vittorio had provided. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded each item. The gravity of her situation pressed down on her. She had become entangled in something far darker than she'd imagined. A knock at her door made her jump. "Dinner will be served in your room tonight," a guard announced through the door. "Mr. DeSantis's orders." "Thank you," she called back, hearing the heavy footsteps retreat. Karen moved to her window, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the manicured grounds. Security teams patrolled the perimeter, their weapons visible now, no longer concealed. The surveillance vehicles that had become a constant presence outside the gates were gone, replaced by unmarked black SUVs that screamed private military. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, remembering how recently she had been nothing more than a maid, invisible and safe in her insignificance. Now she was a player in a deadly game, valuable enough to protect, dangerous enough to kill. Darkness settled over the estate like a shroud. Karen turned away from the window, not seeing the shadows that moved against the garden walls, or the silenced weapons being assembled in the tree line. She didn't notice the brief flicker of the security cameras as they were expertly looped, or the guard at the far gate slumping silently in his booth. She sat at her small desk, trying to focus on Elena's medical data, unaware that death was already scaling the outer walls, creeping closer with each passing moment. Karen jolted awake at the sound of breaking glass. The room was pitch black, save for moonlight filtering through her window. Her heart hammered as she heard the whisper of boots on carpet. Too quiet, too practiced. She slid from her bed, bare feet silent on the floor. Years of moving unnoticed through the mansion had taught her stealth. The doorknob turned slowly, and she pressed herself against the wall beside it. Black-clad figures slipped in, weapons raised. Their night vision goggles swept the empty bed, and Karen used their moment of confusion to dart past them into the hallway. A hand grabbed for her, catching only air. "Target mobile!" A harsh whisper followed her as she ran. Gunfire erupted behind her, but it wasn't aimed at her. Vittorio's security team had engaged, and the hallway exploded into chaos. She ducked into an alcove as bullets tore through the air. Then Vittorio himself appeared at the corridor's end, and Karen's breath caught. He moved like a predator, all controlled power and lethal grace. 2 attackers turned toward him, but they never stood a chance. His first shot took one in the throat. The second tried to raise his weapon, but Vittorio was already there, knife appearing in his free hand. The blade caught moonlight as it sliced upward, opening the man from sternum to chin. Blood sprayed across the expensive wallpaper. 3 more operatives rushed him. Vittorio's movements became a blur of violence. He shot one point blank, used the falling body as a shield, then broke another's neck with a single savage twist. The third managed to fire, grazing Vittorio's shoulder, but the wound only seemed to fuel his rage. Karen watched, horrified yet unable to look away, as Vittorio grabbed the last attacker and slammed him into the wall. The knife plunged into the man's chest once, twice, 3 times. Each strike was precise, meant to inflict maximum damage. When it was over, Vittorio stood among the bodies, chest heaving. Blood dripped from his hands, stained his white shirt crimson. His eyes found Karen in her hiding place, and he stalked toward her with that same predatory grace. "This," he growled, pressing her against the wall, "is why you need my protection." His bloodied hand left prints on the wall beside her head. "I never asked for any of this," Karen shot back, anger overriding her fear. "I was invisible before. Safe." "You were never safe," his voice rose. "The moment you showed your abilities, you became valuable. Valuable things get taken unless they're properly guarded. I'm not a thing to be owned." "No?" He leaned closer, his breath hot against her cheek. "Then tell me why your heart is racing, why you can't look away from me, even with their blood still on my hands." Karen's breath hitched. He was right, she couldn't look away. The violence should have disgusted her, sent her running in terror. Instead, heat pooled in her belly at his proximity, at the raw power emanating from him. "I protect what's mine," he continued, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And you, Karen Marin, are now mine to protect." The tension between them crackled like electricity. His free hand came up to trace her jaw, leaving a faint smear of red. Karen's lips parted involuntarily, and Vittorio's eyes darkened with hunger. He moved infinitesimally closer, the heat of his body pressing against hers. Karen's hands came up to his chest, but she couldn't tell if she meant to push him away or pull him closer. "Sir!" A guard's voice shattered the moment. "Perimeter secured. All hostiles eliminated." Vittorio didn't move for a long moment, his eyes still locked with Karen's. Finally, he stepped back, though his expression remained intense. "Come," he ordered, taking her arm. "You're moving to the secure wing now." As they walked through the carnage-strewn hallway, Karen felt the weight of what had happened settling over her. She had watched this man kill without hesitation, with a skill that spoke of years of violence. She should be terrified. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly into his grip, drawn to his deadly strength even as her mind rebelled against the attraction. Vittorio's thumb stroked once across her pulse point, a gesture so subtle she might have imagined it. Neither spoke as they moved deeper into the mansion's fortified heart, but the silence hummed with unresolved tension. Karen knew something had shifted between them tonight, something that could never be undone. Morning sunlight filtered through the bulletproof windows of Vittorio's office as Karen sat across from him, noting the shadows under his eyes. His usual mask of control had slipped, revealing something raw beneath. 10 years ago, he began, voice rough. My wife Marina was killed in our own home. His hands clenched on the desk. The killer was someone I'd trusted for 15 years, someone who ate at my table, who held Elena when she was a baby. Karen's heart ached at the pain in his voice. This explained so much about his fierce protection of Elena, his walls of mistrust. Since then, he continued, meeting her eyes, Elena has been the only person I could trust completely, until now. The weight of his words hung between them. Karen found herself leaning forward, drawn by this glimpse of vulnerability in a man who showed none. That afternoon, she and Elena pored over implant data in the medical suite. Elena's hands shook as they uncovered a pattern of access codes used during the tampering, codes that matched her fiancé's security clearance. He's been different lately, Elena whispered, tears filling her eyes. Distant. But I never thought. When night fell, Vittorio appeared at Karen's door, ostensibly to discuss their findings. But as soon as the door closed, the pretense evaporated. His hand cupped her face, and when their lips met, years of loneliness and need exploded between them. They came together with desperate intensity, hands exploring, breaths mingling. In the darkness, they found healing in each other's arms. Karen stirred awake, her hand reaching across empty sheets still warm from Vittorio's presence. Sunlight streamed through the windows as she dressed, her body pleasantly sore from the night before. At breakfast, Elena's face was pale as she pushed a tablet across the table. Look what Papa's security team intercepted. The grainy surveillance footage showed Elena's fiancé in a darkened office, speaking intently with Marco, one of Vittorio's most trusted lieutenants. Their lips moved silently as they examined what looked like implant schematics. They worked together, Elena whispered, hands trembling. They tried to kill me. Before they could alert Vittorio, alarms blared through the mansion. Guards rushed past, reporting a perimeter breach on the south side. Vittorio's voice carried down the hall as he barked orders, moving away from the main house. Stay calm, Karen told Elena, but glass shattered in the next room. Black-clad figures swarmed in, weapons raised. Karen shoved Elena behind her, fighting as rough hands grabbed her. A punch to her stomach doubled her over. Through watering eyes, she saw Elena being pulled to safety by loyal guards while she was dragged outside. They threw her into a van, tires squealing as they sped away. Through the windows, she glimpsed government buildings before they reached a concrete facility. In a sterile interrogation room, cold metal bit into her wrists. Dread settled in, her stomach as she realized how this looked. The night she spent with Vittorio, followed by an attack. He would think she had betrayed him. Karen's head lolled as electricity coursed through her body, but she kept her lips sealed. They wanted Elena's implant details, tried breaking her with psychological games and pain. Still, she wouldn't cave. The DeSantis boss is decimating our safe houses, a guard whispered outside. 3 facilities gone in hours. Hope flickered in Karen's chest. Despite her earlier doubts, maybe Vittorio was actually searching for her. The thought gave her strength. Suddenly, darkness engulfed the facility. Emergency sirens wailed as gunfire erupted. Screams echoed down the corridor, getting closer. Metal groaned as her cell door was ripped open. Vittorio stood there, blood splattered and lethal. He gathered her broken body in his arms. "No one touches what's mine," he growled. The horizon painted pink streaks across the sky as Vittorio carried Karen through the mansion's doors. Elena rushed to them, her face lighting up with relief. "I cracked it," Elena announced, leading them to a study filled with glowing screens. The implant's data revealed everything: illegal testing, government black sites, all of it. Karen, despite her exhaustion, leaned forward to examine Elena's findings. Together, they compiled the evidence into an irrefutable package while Vittorio made calls, orchestrating a devastating information release that would bring the entire program crashing down. Within hours, international media exploded with exposés. Government officials scrambled as watchdog organizations demanded answers. The black sites were exposed, their illegal operations laid bare. Vittorio disappeared briefly, returning with blood on his cuffs. Elena's former fiancé and the lieutenant who betrayed them would never threaten anyone again. His eyes held no remorse, only savage satisfaction. That evening, in the privacy of Karen's suite, Vittorio dropped to one knee, his usual icy control cracked, revealing raw emotion. "I thought I'd lost you," he confessed hoarsely. "I won't live without you. This isn't captivity I'm offering, it's partnership. Everything I have, everything I am, is yours if you want it." Karen touched his face, feeling the tremor in his jaw. "I choose this. I choose you." A week later, Karen stood in her new medical facility, built within the DeSantis compound. Vittorio's arms encircled her waist as she surveyed her domain, a place where her forbidden knowledge would now save lives, instead of being hidden. "Welcome home, my love," he murmured against her hair. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.